attack, fast fatal heart impact, past painful scars. In fact, I blast tasteful bars and packs. I back up my actions, fact don't ask, grab reactions, jacked attack with every word, then act with class as they hear me snap. I got nothing to lose, cause I fought and felt the bruise. Now I'm not the one confused, call the shots and they produce. I ain't lost, I'm finally loose, pick a new silver excuse. I need the views to boost me to a new abuse of being used. Everybody wants a piece now, y'all can rest in peace now. You're dead to me, so peace out. Remember, you're discreet out. Get ready for defeat now.
Alrighty, hello everybody. This is Kirisho here. And now, whenever we last left off, we had a bit of a odd scenario. Now, Midoriya and Todoroki, both of them born with half and half abilities, and Endeavor given a choice by Ray. A choice that he has to make right here and right now. She is going to leave and take Midoriya and Todoroki far, far away from him. And he will possibly never see his kids again. Or he can change. He can calm down. Try and be a better person and a better father. Since his kids are already down the path of not wanting to use their quirks. Todoroki already talking about it, and beginning to favor his ice side. Now, with that being said, Endeavor does make this choice. As the next day, he is training with these two in the backyard. Both of them running around and doing exercises. As soon as they get done with a set of exercises and are exhausted, instead of Endeavor telling them to get back up and continue, he tells the two to go inside and get some water. They will continue again in 5 minutes. Both of them while sitting on the ground, simply just looking at each other. Before Endeavor just says 4 minutes and 55 seconds. Midoriya immediately getting up and beginning to run, while Todoroki, he's right behind his brother. Both the two running inside and getting some water. As over the next few weeks, Endeavor, instead of pushing them to breaking points every day, he pushes them to limitations. And, well, it's up to his kids to push past them. Now, along with that, Endeavor does actually start showing them proper ways of training, pitting them against each other and telling them to use their quirks. Now, along with that, over the last few weeks, Midoriya and Todoroki have also actually been able to spend time with their family, instead of just constant training. It's actually been a bit of a stress relief, since they're able to talk with their older sister, their older brother, and their oldest. Now, while these two are paired up against each other for the first time, they do get ready. Midoriya simply putting his body into a bit of a stance, bringing his hands up. Now, he does tell both of them to begin. Todoroki immediately moving his leg outwards, and going to blast some ice at Midoriya. It isn't like sports festival level, but you can clearly tell that it's at least a good amount for his age, as these two aren't too far away from each other. Midoriya simply stomping his leg forwards as the earth in front of him begins to shoot outwards in that direction, the earth and the ice colliding against one another. As Ray watches the battle, and so does Endeavor. As they watch as Todoroki then activates his fire side, and actually does try and blast at Midoriya, who simply brings up his left hand and throws up a wall of, well, not a wall of ice. he throws up a wall of wind, as you could say. He simply blasted his right hand upwards towards the air, and blew the wind underneath him up, basically making a wall of it. Todoroki's fire, as soon as it tries to make contact, deoxygenizes with it, and simply tries going around, basically making it a wind wall for a few seconds. Midoriya throwing up his hands and blasting them outwards. Midoriya thinking that he can simply hit his brother with a large gust of wind, to which it was too powerful, and it sent Midoriya flying backwards, to which he simply threw out his left leg and touched the ground. As soon as he did, he turned his hand around and tried throwing a piece of rock at his brother, simply picking up the piece of earth underneath his foot, and then sending it flying that direction. Midoriya being set off balance once again, throwing his hands behind him and sending a large gust of wind, sending him flying upwards. As soon as that happens, Endeavor watches as Todoroki brings up a wall of ice, and the piece of earth smashes directly into it, knocking Todoroki to the ground. Endeavor is seeing that for a second and going to check on Todoroki. Ray running outside and telling Endeavor to catch Izuku, to which he simply looks up in the air and runs forwards, having to actually jump outwards and catch his son. This actually being a bit relieving. Midoriya almost began to start crying, since he didn't really expect that. While Todoroki, yeah, he's a bit hurt, but he'll be fine. Ray's simply asking him if he is okay, and trying to help him. Now, Midoriya, he will be fine. Todoroki, he only has a little bit of scratches on his face, as Ray can actually see him, and so can Endeavor, who tells him that that is enough for today. Their abilities seem to be too odd against each other, and that this was a bad idea in the first place. He really should have waited until they were older. Ray actually turning to him and actually being a bit more surprised by that statement. He didn't think that they were ready, but he still wanted them to learn about their abilities. Well, she can't really blame him. He is showing concern. Now, with that being said, he decides to begin training these two separate instead of having them fight against each other. Midoriya and his brother will both be outside at the same time, yeah, and they will train their quirks, but they will not fight. Now, with that being said, the two do begin to learn more. Todoroki being taught by his mom and his dad, while Izuku, he simply is trying to figure it out on his own sometimes. Endeavor is there to tell Midoriya what he did, and Ray, she's not really too much of an expert on it. Most of the time she can really just tell him that he's either doing this wrong or possibly doing this wrong. However, she does bring up the fact that that piece of earth that he threw at Todoroki, yeah, it was under his foot. And that may be why he was unable to be steady with his quirk. Now, with that being said, Midoriya actually does write this down a bit. That he was simply too late to use the recoil. Or, well, yeah. He tried doing an All Might smash with his hand, and his body, not being heavy enough, could not withstand the recoil. So, he was blasted backwards. It's both a good thing and a bad thing to know about, since, well, that could be a mode of transportation. However, that's not the way he was wanting to use it. Now, along with that, Todoroki does try and learn more about his eyes, and about his fire. Him simply trying to see how far he can blast it outwards in front of him. While for his ice, yeah, that's a bit more difficult. One thing he does do is he blasts his ice outwards as far as he can, until he reaches a certain distance to where it stops. Then he does try to blast his fire to melt the ice. Yeah. Endeavor is simply watching over their training. As Midoriya today, he is outside. And he's actually just moving around the backyard, blowing wind in every single direction. And anytime he needs to, he puts out fires his brother causes. As the two go on to talk, Todoroki simply going on to say that this is actually a bit more fun. And it's, well, different. Usually their dad does try and step in and directly try and train them. However, right now he's only letting them test their quirks. And Midoriya does bring up the fact that he could ask Dad about his fire, since he could probably help with it. Now, Shoto is a bit more hesitant. After everything that Dad has put them through, or put both of them through, really, yeah. Talking to him about advice on this isn't really a good idea. But you can clearly tell that he's trying to make efforts. Him simply just leaving his dad alone right now, and trying to not talk with him. As for Midoriya, though, yeah, he goes to Endeavor, and tries to ask him about quirks, about his own. Now, Endeavor can't really give Midoriya a lot of words on this, or encouragement. Simply telling his son that if he's going to have a quirk like that, then they should at least look it up online. See if there was any pro heroes like that. Now, with that being said, after looking for a bit of time, they do find some heroes. They see heroes like Hawk, the bunny chick, the dragon chick, and I believe the dishwasher guy, along with Eraserhead and a few more. And eventually they do see a hero, Cementos. Yeah, the guy could be some help. However, he is a little bit busy. And from seeing some of his fights, it does seem to be a bit interesting. Izuku does watch some of his fights, watching Cementos actually use his cement as a way of moving. Watching as he simply throws it into the air and attaches it to a building, before just using it and creating steps in front of him. If you were not paying attention or didn't really care, you would probably think this is just some form of illusions, since he is doing it so flawlessly. Now, Midoriya, seeing that, actually does watch a move Cementos does, where a piece of cement is sent flying, and Cementos is on top of it. As soon as he touches down in another building, yeah, it's a bit more dangerous, so you can see why Cementos does not use it a lot. However, people do call it the flying pillar. The damage it can do, though, yikes. Now, Midoriya, seeing it, does actually find it to be cool. And, well, he goes outside and tries to do this with rocks. Now, as soon as Midoriya does actually begin by pulling the rocks into the air, he opens his eyes. He can feel that they're a bit more heavy. However, now that he's thinking about it, this looks a lot more like telekinesis. He is simply holding these things in the air, and someone would probably mistake it for that. Then again, that does remind him of Hawk's quirk. It's not direct telekinesis, but he can control those feathers. That's really cool. Now, Midoriya simply does lower the rocks down before looking down at his feet and manipulate the earth underneath them. As soon as he does that, he does have cracks around the rocks around his feet, before he simply tries to lift them up into the air. Now, the rocks under his feet do begin to move upwards. However, Midoriya does have to start keeping his balance, as he's floating off of the ground for a minute. And he does try to actually get better at this, try and be more coordinated with it, until his nose does start to bleed. He doesn't realize it until he feels something on his shirt, and it's running down his face. And he does have to set these rocks down and run inside. Quickly wiping off his nose, his mom does ask him exactly what happened. And Midoriya simply just runs to his room really quick, and runs back outside, with his hero notebook, beginning by writing down what he found out. His quirk works like a form of telepathy. That's interesting. However, he can also hold things up in the air, and he can simply stand on those things. And he simply writes down a form of flight? Question mark. And Endeavor, he's doing pro hero work right now. And Ray does actually see what Midoriya does, since he goes over and tries to do it again. As soon as she does watch him float around the backyard on these rocks for a minute, she is actually very shocked by that. And she actually does take a video, which she sends to Fuyumi, who sends it to her brother. Now, with that being said, I do want to say that she also sends it to Endeavor, who simply responds by being in shock. He didn't know that the boy could do that, and it's actually quite interesting, as he's just trying to think about it more. He didn't even think of the possibility of his son being able to do something like this. He thought that he could just use the earth underneath his feet. He could lift it, yeah, but he can't really move something big enough for him to stand on yet, right? That's interesting. Well then, I guess I should get my son started on some proper training, or at least an apprenticeship. Now, with that, Endeavor does call a hero and try and talk with them. Now, Cementos is confused as to why Endeavor called him, until he does explain one of his son's quirks. Cementos kind of beginning to see a pattern. He called the Cement Hero because his son can manipulate Earth. Him just asking Endeavor if he wants to, well, meet his son then. Endeavor actually asking if he can give his son some advice, and some encouraging words from a pro with a quirk like his. Now, Cementos is surprised. He's not really heard Endeavor talk like that before. So yeah. He simply tells him that on the weekend he will have an off day. So he can either bring his son by UA, or by an agency, or he can come to his home. To which Endeavor simply tells him that he can bring his son to the agency. He'll bring both of them. Now, with that being said, Midoriya and Todoroki do head to the agency one day, on the weekend. And Midoriya does actually meet Cementos, who does begin to give him advice on how to use the quirk. And he sees it firsthand, along with the video Endeavor has actually shown him. That caught Cementos' interest. The boy simply tried standing on rocks and using his powers to levitate them. Smart. As Todoroki, or Shoto, does actually begin to talk with some of the other pros and try and train against them. Them acting friendly and actually having a bit of a laugh with these kids. Talking with them and giving them more and more tips and advice. One hero telling Todoroki that with an ice quirk he has to be very careful. His body could fall below temperatures that are normal, and he can start to suffer hypothermia. That piece of advice is very important, since he's heard a different piece from his father. He has to be very careful with his flames. Otherwise, not only could he burn himself, but his body temperature will go to very, very high levels. And if it gets high enough, he could pass out from heat stroke. Or possibly, yeah, a worse situation. Now, that does mean that he can combine these two pieces of advice, thinking for a second that he needs to use one quirk and another at the same time. So, that is what he needs to do. That is what he needs to learn and practice a lot. So he does need both of his quirks. Him giving up his rebellion before it even started. Now, with that being said, I do believe that that will be a good point to leave this off of. And I really hope that you guys appreciate the nod I'm giving to Inko's telekinesis, with Midoriya having a similar ability to Hawk with rocks. I believe I said that right. Now, that just seemed interesting to me, because not only did I find a good way to cameo, oh hey, I'm throwing like a reference to canon, but I'm also keeping it like to the character. So I actually don't even have to break continuity for that joke. Anyways, I do hope you guys enjoyed.